It's all about pioneering breakthrough in healthcare for everyone, everywhere, sustainably.
The ability of AI, at that point at least, was to see what humans can't see. It sees patterns. It sees
Yes.
patterns because it has access to so much data which a human cannot, consume in one go.
Rather than the physician spending time on non-productive tasks, they can focus on treating the patient. So this is where AI is becoming more and more of an assistant to the physicians so that it can enable precise diagnostics. So through the digital twin concept, okay, we can induce, okay, all this, all the lab reports, all the imaging reports, everything into the digital twin. And you can actually accelerate to see how I'm going to age with the diseases.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Our Own Devices. This time, we are going to talk about AI again, as always, but we're going to talk about how AI is coming into medicine, for instance. And this is not really a new topic for us. We have touched this a few years back with a company called Suki.ai, which was, in the early stage of bringing in technology that helps, diagnose things from reports and all of that. Now we will maybe put that on steroids and talk to Kalavathi GV, who is the Executive Director and Head of the Global Development Center of Siemens Healthineers. So, ma'am, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very happy to be
So,
here. Mm.
if I can start by asking you, can you explain what this, the Siemens Healthineers actually do?
Okay, so Siemens Healthineers is a company which is very well known, which has been there in existence for more than 170 years. And in India, the commercial side has been there for about 60 to 70 years. And the development center, which I lead, has been there for 30 years. We cater to everything when it comes to healthcare, starting from the diagnosis, to the treatment, to the survivorship, right? From the end-to-end perspective. I'm sure you might have heard about the CT machines, MR machines, etc. So we have complete when it comes to the cancer care continuum or when it comes to radiology. So we have our presence, and when it comes to diagnostics. So as a company, if you look at if I have to divide it into different parts, we have diagnostic imaging, and then where the CT, MR, molecular imaging, ultrasound is separate. And then we have diagnostics, okay, where we get into lab diagnostics and then things like that. And then also Varian is a recent acquisition, I'll say, a few years back, which helps us to have a complete cancer care kind of a suite. Okay, so given our purpose, okay, by the way, I'm very, very, what do you say? The purpose of Siemens Healthineers resonates with me because it's all about pioneering breakthrough in healthcare for everyone, everywhere, sustainably. Okay.
Yeah.
Why I say it resonates very well is if you look at the whole world, at least half of the population does not have the basic healthcare services. So the access to healthcare becomes extremely important. So we as a company, we focus on reaching to the patients. Okay. The way we measure our success is through increasing the patient touch points. So that is the reason I think we are a company who believes in making a difference to people's lives.
So if we talk about AI in healthcare, it's not really new. It's developed over the years from what I understand. But again, in the past couple of years, maybe it started hitting an L curve or a J curve or whatever we want to call it. With a lot of things coming together at the same time. Is that right? And if you could explain, what are the big use cases that you're seeing when it comes to AI and the kind of stuff that you guys are doing?
Fantastic. So as you rightly said, AI is not now. It has been there for 150 years. But
Yeah.
in the last few years, where it hit an exponential curve is with the emergence of generative AI, where it became kind of you can talk to this an AI, and then it can give you answers. But before going there, let me talk about what is the problem that we are trying to solve. Right? As I said, half of the world, okay, the global population still lacks the essential healthcare services. Now, if you combine this with the aging population and the rising chronic diseases, and also if you look at the projected shortfall of about 10 million healthcare workers by 2030, okay, this puts a lot of strain, immense strain on the healthcare systems and also the healthcare providers. Now, adding to this, if you look at some of the reports which has been published, radiologist spends about 11 hours in a week, average 11 hours in a week on paperwork. Okay, and 61% of the physicians, they have reported because of these tasks, okay, it is causing them a lot of burnout. And apart from this, if you look at what is the ratio of the skilled workers to the population, we have about 11 skilled workers. This includes the doctors and the nurses per the population of 10,000 people. Okay, this is in India.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at India. Now, this is far away from the recommended, I would say the density, which is about 44.5 per 10,000, which the WHO recommends. So given this, there is a lot of barriers when it comes to traditional healthcare. So this is where the AI is becoming a great news, especially post-pandemic. I think where it paved its way, there was a lot of acceptance for a digital kind of intervention. So this is where AI has come into rescue. It is not just a buzzword, but it is providing as a support for accelerating the solutions and also increasing the access. Now, if you look at the industry, there is a shift from a reactive care to proactive care and also to a prescriptive care, right? With the AI, I think we can analyze a large amount of data and understand the patterns. And especially when it comes to healthcare, I think nowadays, if you ask people, they would say, how can I get the initial symptoms? Okay, even before the initial stages, is there signal that a disease is going to onset? Is there a possibility? So this is especially when you get into a non-communicable disease like a cancer or a cardiovascular disease or a chronic respiratory disease or diabetes. All these are non-communicable disease. And it actually, we can find out some of the symptoms way ahead of time. Okay. Today, if you look at it, every 2 seconds, somebody dies because of this NCD, the non-communicable disease. So if there is an opportunity for us to identify this and help people at the earliest stages, then they can hope for a better life and the quality of living. So this is where the AI-based tools is promising us to help with better solutions, okay, where we can enable remote scanning. For instance, let me again go back to the problem. There is a startling difference between an urban and a rural setup in India. If you go to rural, about 70 to 80% of the specialty doctor positions, especially in the community healthcare, it is still vacant. So there is no way that you can reach. People have to travel long distances to get their care. So through AI, through this remote scanning and remote interpretation, I think it is helping many people in a very, very, I would say, meaningful manner. Okay. Ultimately, AI is not here to replace anybody, right? It is enabling the doctors, as I said, rather than the physicians spending time on non-productive tasks, they can focus on treating the patient. So this is where AI is becoming more and more of an assistant to the physicians so that it can enable precise diagnostics.
Yeah. So,
okay.
So I've heard use cases where, let's say, you are in a village and it has maybe a screening center for, let's say, breast cancer.
Yeah.
And 100 screenings are done on a daily basis, but it tells you the two which maybe immediately needs to go to the next stage or a specialist in a town nearby.
Yeah.
And again, you're also saying maybe there are in this 100 or two which could potentially develop into something more serious, and it's giving that predictive layer along with what and again it can do it without having a physician in the room, right? Like it can
Yes.
And in a country like India where there's a huge gap, as you mentioned, between the patients and the doctors, if I put it very simply, this can be a force multiplier, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. You talked about cancer. In fact, from Siemens Healthineers perspective,
Yeah,
we have mobile units, mobile
yeah,
units where be it cancer or be it some of the other diseases, you can go and then there are solutions where you can enable, the local technologies who is not very
yeah,
experienced to do some of the basic scans. And then you can get those data and compare it with the generic data using the AI model, etc. And as you rightly said, identify those important ones, which needs immediate treatment. They can be
yeah.
informed and then they can get into the next step. Okay, I'll give you some of the examples, the Singo virtual cockpit. It enables remote screening assistance and also the interpretation.
Mm.
So we have like this many other solutions, the AI RAD companion, which can reduce the repetitive task of the radiologist. And through the AI, it can diagnose and it can help them to make the right treatment going forward.
Also, I remember, and maybe this is before COVID, that,
Uh-huh.
in some conversation, somebody had told me that the ability of AI, at that point at least, was to see what, humans can't see. It sees patterns, it sees
Yes,
patterns because it has access to so much data which a human cannot, consume in one go. And you suddenly see patterns which humanly you wouldn't have found. So how does
absolutely.
that work in the space of medicine?
See, this is exactly the same thing, okay?
Yeah,
AI is a technology which is going to enable, as I said, which is going to assist the physician. In
yeah,
order to get to that, okay, the AI model is as good as the data which is fed to it.
mm,
Okay, it is all about the data strategy. So this is where in India, if you look at India, one of the positive things that is happening is we are collecting a lot of data. Each of the companies have a collaboration with the local key opinion leaders, the local hospitals, etc. And through the proper regulated process, we collect the
yeah,
data. And then using that data, we annotate the data. And then after that, feed that into train the model, train the model to really identify those patterns. By the way, one size doesn't fit all.
yeah,
Healthcare is very, very regional. Okay, the
yeah,
prevalence of diseases is very regional. In the same way, the disease patterns is very, very regional. Okay, so
yeah,
this is where our collaboration with the industry partners, the hospitals, and how we annotate, how we train the AI model to identify those diseases which are regional matters the most. So this is exactly what you're saying is exactly what happens in the healthcare industry as well.
yeah.
Huh?
So, uh, also this concept of patient twinning, is
Yeah.
it possible to explain, how do you use it? What is it, and how do you use it in your day-to-day work?
Okay. So by the way, when we talk about digital twin, let me take a
Yeah,
little this one. So digital twinning is not a new concept. It emerged in 1960s with NASA, right? So it is the same concept which is coming in. Okay. So what happens is think about let us say I'm a patient. Okay. I go to the doctor, I get the lab test done, I get some imaging done, I get so many things done. So through the digital twin concept, okay, we can induce, all this, all the lab reports, all the imaging reports, everything into the digital twin. And you can actually accelerate to see how I'm going to age with the diseases, right? What is going to happen? Okay, along with my data, the digital twin is empowered through the generic data, through all the AI, the data models, and then other things that I stated. It is a twin, okay, which understands how to personalize. And the only way it is going to personalize is through my data and then see how the disease is going to either progress further or through the treatment, how the treatment itself is progressing. These are some of the things that we can look through the digital twin. I'll give you an example. In case of Siemens Healthineers, we have made some inroads to the digital twinning. For instance, we have come up with a liver disease. Okay, so for the liver, we are working on creating a model that replicates the organ anatomy, okay, including the shape, the vasculature, and the lesion. Okay, if there is a liver disease, the
yeah,
lesion also, and as well as the physiological processes like the blood flow, the hepatic function. So all these things it is going to simulate and see in future how it is going to progress. And it's also going to enable the clinicians to evaluate and refine their treatment. So we are starting like this. Like this, we have a digital twin for different anatomies, okay, for the heart. For instance, like,
Yes.
you can have a simulator of the heart, digital twin of the heart, where you again induce all my specific things if I am the patient,
Yeah.
and make the heart beat faster. For instance, like, in 5 minutes, you can actually make it beat the number of times it would beat in 1 year. Okay. And
Okay.
because you've fed the inputs on my specific thing,
Mhm.
it can actually tell you how my heart is going to progress in the next 1 year. And depending on that, you can personalize the treatment. So that is
Yeah.
the essence of the digital twin. How can you understand what happens from a disease pattern perspective?
Yeah.
How can you personalize it? And then how can you treat it? And also understand how the treatment is progressing as you go forward. So
Yeah.
that is the beauty of, like, the digital twin. And slowly we are looking at different anatomies. And someday we are going to come into a patient twin, which is going to help us to see how we can be much more proactive. And if the disease has onset, how can it be much more personalized?
So it's almost like a load testing, right? Like, you're going to test how the heart is going to function. Like if you do what a person's heartbeat, heart
Yes,
is going to beat in a year, you also know
yes.
how the impact is going to be across the year. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And one more thing I wanted to bring out, okay?
yeah.
We have something called the common patient data model, okay? It
Mhm.
helps to integrate the data from the hospital systems, like, as I said, the lab
Yeah.
reports, the
Yeah.
imaging, the clinical notes, and then have a single view, have a connected view. Because normally what happens is when you go to the doctor, they'll see each one at a time. So this is
Yeah.
where a digital twin will help you to put all the perspective together,
Mhm.
because it is a scattered data. So how
Yeah.
can you put all these things together, and how can you have, like, a meaningful outcome, okay, for
Yeah.
and at a real time. And this is where, like, it can help you with accurate simulations, as you rightly
Mhm.
said, the load testing,
Yeah.
and it can
Yeah.
get you better insights, and it will be of greater support for clinical decisions.
Yeah.
That's the other way of
So
looking at it.
you also mentioned that a lot of it depends on the quality of the input, right? The
Yes.
quality of the input, like, at least my impression would be that in a country like India, it is at least not standardized. Like you go to a different doctor, you go to maybe a different lab. Like, I have a doctor who says that, okay, always come with a lab which has at least these certifications. I don't want you to go to any random lab. So how do you standardize the input of the data? Because in India, I think it's quite varied. Maybe the data is not collected, uh, it is not collected in a standardized format. It's not. So how do you get over that problem in a country like India?
Okay. So by the way, it's not just India, it's across, right?
Okay.
So, but there are some basic standards that has to be followed, be it any lab,
Mhm.
etc.
Yeah.
But apart from this, when you collect the data, you're just not going to feed it just like that to the model. Okay.
Mhm.
This is where it goes through rigorous process of, first of all, anonymization. There should be a consent, okay, that we can use the data with the enterprise. Second, and with the patient itself, if you're using the patient data. Next, we have to have the annotations. Like, there is a true radiologist or whosoever, the clinician, who will annotate the data, taking the data, if they were to write a report, what the report looks like. And it should be like, in the lab, before sharing the report with you, it'll go through a rigorous process, right? In the same way, it goes through a process before you accept the data as a good data, okay, into the model, feeding into the model. So that is extremely important. So even if it's heterogeneous, it goes
Yeah.
through the initial process of annotation and validation before the model can be trained.
And is this also going to help in how remote healthcare is developing? Right now, uh, is it possible for then? Is it possible then to have robotics come into the picture, because a lot of it is it's very well mapped, and what's going to happen. And is that happening in a monitored kind of a situation, where there is always a physician in the frame?
Okay, so you're talking about two things. Okay, one is about, is there a remote capability possible using all these technologies?
Yes.
Which is yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Because through the AI, as I shared with you, there is virtual cockpits and virtual doctors, which is possible. There are different solutions across the industry. And your second thing was, how do you bring in robotics? Okay.
Yes.
The real robotics is about building much more intelligence, okay, into the machine. Okay. It is not just robotics. It is about the AI, the robotics, the sensing, the automation, everything coming together to be understand the patient context and to be responsive to the patient and also to the clinical needs. Okay. And one of the most exciting focus, okay, areas, especially when it comes to robotics and AI and sensing, whatever I stated, is the endovascular robotics, specifically designed for neurovascular procedure. This is what we are focusing on at Healthineers. For instance, like, when, take an example, okay, somebody has a stroke, okay, the minute stroke happens, every minute counts, right? There is that golden period, right? Within that, if there is any intervention possible, it will save the life of the person, okay, and the quality of life. So imagine a life-saving intervention like a thrombectomy being performed remotely by a specialist through a robotic-assisted system without any delay. This is the game changer that we are talking about through robotics. So even though, like, it is healthcare is a highly regulated field, we can envision the future where humans and the machines, they will work in a synchronized manner, which can enhance the physician's ability to save lives and elevating the patient care itself. So I just gave an example like this. I'm just giving you an example because there are things which are happening already. Okay. For instance, I'm proud to share, okay, that we have already started working with the National Cancer Institute in Haryana. This is the India's first fully robotic core clinical laboratory, which is powered by Siemens Healthineers. Okay. So this is where we are working on integrating or automizing the IT solutions to streamline the laboratory workflow, which can reduce the turnaround time and which can support in scaling high volume public health setting, especially in that setting, it can help. So this is one of the examples. In the same way, we have multiple projects which are going forward in the intelligent robotics through collaborative innovations with the academia, with the hospitals, etc., worldwide. Okay, so this is the end thing which is happening already.
So before we wind up, one last question, if I can ask you, with so much advancement happening in technology, and again with AI, one other thing that we are seeing is that the pace of technological advancement is also increasing. You're getting new things happen quite fast compared to how it used to be earlier. And with your experience in this field, what excites you the most about these times?
See, honestly, at the end of the day, no matter whatever advancement or of course, as you rightly said, technology is advancing at the speed of light.
Yeah.
And it is also helping us, to enable healthy living for people. That means, the technology is becoming an enabler to take care of the customer's pain points. So as I said, no matter how advanced or digital medicine becomes, patients are looking for, not the platforms or the technology. They're looking for true outcomes, which really matters, which is going to help them to have a better living. What makes the difference is, as I said, early and accurate diagnostics. And how can you have a treatment which is tailored to them and which is personalized? That is why, our focus should remain on how do you take this technology and enable the predictive and personalized medicine. Okay, this is where I see that AI and robotics and then all the technologies coming together, okay, and also enabling the digital twin, enabling this robotic, and then also theranostics when it comes to cancer. Okay, how do you bring in the right therapy, okay, for the patient? How do you identify at the early stages? I think this is what makes me really happy that we are marrying the technology to drive the right purpose and then to make a difference to people's lives.
So again, all of this is making me sort of feel good that at least for at least for the future, we are looking at a much more seamless uh, medical process which enables an equal distribution of the ability to get treated, right? It's not going to be limited to some part of the world or some part of a country, or maybe to even the economics of it. So truly democratizing good healthcare, using AI, I think that's a great opportunity that we should all be really looking forward to. So thanks for being on the show, ma'am. It was wonderful listening to you. And again, it's on a very positive note for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think the questions that you asked were, I think it'll spread the word that each one of us should take the opportunity to leverage the technology to make the
Yeah.
difference. That is one
Yeah.
point. And then second thing is, thank you for doing this podcast because it is going to increase the awareness.
Yes.
And going forward, it is not just about the technology, it is the ecosystem play. The
Yeah.
number of people who are, and especially healthcare is a team sport, right? And the ecosystem has to come together in order to see how we can identify those diseases much early so that you can treat it and then enable better life and the survivorship. Okay. So thank you for taking time, okay, to have this discussion, and wish you the very best.
As is the mandate of this show, our listeners, I'm sure, have learned something new. And this time they learned something that will change their lives. On this note, thank you, ma'am, for being on the show. We'll be back again next week with another guest and a lot more insight. Till then, we are available everywhere you listen to our podcast.